Yes, perfect. Time for a forecast. So let's dive into the dollar first, because what are we seeing? We are seeing that we are not respecting this daily Verwijgen gap lower right there. Overall, order flow is still bearish. So we can still deliver lower off of this order block that we're currently coming into. But it's also understanding that we have a weekly Verwijgen gap that we are creating above price action right there. So in the previous forecast, we mentioned, all right, if we do not really want to follow through lower, then I do think that we might want to trade into the weekly Verwijgen gap. And that is definitely a huge possibility that we are seeing right now. Now, overall here on the dollar, we can already look to potentially continue lower. I am not too convinced on it. I'm not too convinced on that we do want to trade into weekly Verwijgen gap. I'm also not too convinced on if we want to trade into the 4 hour or if we want to already continue lower is what I mean. So those two options are pretty 50-50 for me right now. So overall, I've noticed that today I was pretty much very wrong on my forecast. So that also leads me to then take a step back to sort of understand, I'm pretty much wrong right now. So my expectations of the market were not very accurate. All right, let me take a step back actually, because clearly I'm not that in sync with the market currently. So that also leads me to, all right, that is a little bit low probability from my side. So overall, again, I want to take a small step back right here. Now, overall, again, I do still think we are bearish here on the dollar. Now, if we can get a 4-hour Verwijgen gap lower, but again, if we get a 4-hour Verwijgen gap lower, then we need to take into account we only have Thursday and Friday to trade that particular 4-hour Verwijgen gap lower, etc. So there's just not a lot of time left to actually continue lower instead of just trading into that weekly Verwijgen gap next week, which is definitely a possibility as well. So overall, again, pretty 50-50, but if we create that weekly Verwijgen gap, I would prefer to trade off of that next week. All right, with that in mind, let's look at ES. And ES, NASDAQ, and YM right here have just been continuing higher actually. So overall, they've just been continuing higher right now. Can still create that weekly Verwijgen gap, but it's not really trading into that weekly Verwijgen gap like I anticipated. So right here, again, we can still look to continue to trend higher, even though the dollar was moving higher today and the indices were also moving higher. So it's a little bit weird overall, but the indices are just very, very strong overall. So right here, it's just waiting for that new clear discount rate, which on NASDAQ, we actually had quite a nice sweep overall right there, which I did expect some lower prices from, which did not happen overall. Now we are not creating bearish Verwijgen gaps and not creating bullish Verwijgen gaps today. So it's also an indication that I do not really like it currently, and it's pretty 50-50 in my eyes. Now overall, we are of course still more bullish. So if we want to trade towards a side, then I would prefer the bullish side still. And that is the same for YM and same for ES overall. Then on DAX, what are we seeing? On DAX, we also are potentially continuing higher, not really creating a daily Verwijgen gap higher. We still have 2 hours and 48 minutes to go. So if we want to do that, then that could be quite nice. But I still want to take into account that weekly Verwijgen gap potentially being created. So overall still bullish. It's just we need a clear discount rate that we can actually head higher from. That is the main thing on a lot of pairs right now. Australian dollar, US dollar. So right here, took a loss right there on Australian dollar, US dollar. If you want to check the trade recap, then please feel free to do so. So right there on the daily Verwijgen gap, we can definitely look to continue higher. That's what I mentioned yesterday. Now, with the dollar not really following through and Australian dollar, US dollar, of course, it's the next thing, as in if the dollar does not want to follow through, then Australian dollar, US dollar will of course also not follow through. So right here, this is where I would want to wait a little bit. Wait for a new 4-hour Verwijgen gap higher. If we get that, then again, it could be interesting because overall I do still think we're bullish, but just need clear time and price to agree with it that we actually do want to continue higher. Then on EU right here, EU, we came into the order block right there and we mentioned, I don't really like that Verwijgen gap, small Verwijgen gap. So overall, I still want to wait for this weekly Verwijgen gap to be created to then potentially sting into that to then continue higher. That is just my preference. With tomorrow as well, US dollar bank holiday, I like this option more of having that weekly Verwijgen gap being created. It's just overall higher probability because there's no reason to come back below that. So currently I'm mainly on the sidelines, mainly waiting a little bit. Where GU right there, if we take a look at GU, We came into the order block as well with the fair value gaps, but what we can see is that the dollar is overall just not really agreeing right there. So let's actually see on the 15-minute. We came into it pretty late during the day. All right, if we get a 4-hour fair value gap higher, again, when in doubt, I just wait for a new fair value gap. If we get that new 4-hour fair value gap higher, I would still be interested. But overall, I want to wait a little bit, not super interested in it right now. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, that's the same exact thing right here, where I'm just waiting for extra fair value gaps, extra confirmation to potentially get involved again. But overall, I was wrong on my expectations on the first expectation. And, well, wrong. We saw the dollar, the daily fair value gap just didn't follow through. So that was the sign, what we mentioned yesterday. All right, if that doesn't follow through, then I want to wait for the weekly fair value gap, ideally. So that is, again, where currently I just wait for the weekly fair value gap on certain pairs, which I prefer. So overall, this is also where I would take a step back personally and would not really get involved in anything. And for EU as well, if we take a look at this, this is not really for me a boundary to go into the lower time frame to look for shorts. That's also not the case. So I'm not really bullish, but I'm also not seeing that boundary, that disrespect boundary, to now go into the lower time frame to look for shorts overall. That's also not something I prefer. So there's definitely a little bit 50-50 on my side right here. Then USD Canadian dollar, very 50-50. Seek and destroy conditions like we mentioned yesterday as well. Definitely do not want to look for any trades right here. USD CHF as well, pretty 50-50 currently. We mentioned daily fair value gap higher, daily fair value gap lower. It's what I would want to see. Currently, it has done nothing of anything like that, so I want to wait right here. USD JPY as well, don't really want to get involved right here. Don't really like it myself. So overall, it's not a lot of opportunity currently in the market for me. For me, of course, that's in my opinion. Now, right here on silver, let's see, we are also not following through towards those highs of the daily fair value gap, which on the 4-hour, we can also see we're not following through. So overall, we might even want to look at shorts. Again, I currently don't like this price action anymore, where yesterday was pretty clean right there. Overall was pretty clean. And then we just didn't follow through anymore, which I don't like to see. So again, we had a nice disrespect boundary here, which then we can take a look at that short. So that is pretty nice actually overall, the disrespect boundary. But currently the following through, etc., is not something we're seeing. So overall, I'm not too satisfied with the current market conditions. Bitcoin as well, potentially creating a bullish daily fair value gap, you could argue right here, but currently just waiting still. Very seek and destroy like. Crude oil. So crude oil actually had a huge move down during this day. Now we have sort of recovered that move, as in we now have a huge move up. So if we can get something along the lines of new fair value gaps tomorrow, then it could still be interesting to look at longs, because I do still think that this wants to deliver higher potentially. But right here, we need some extra confirmation because we had a huge move down as well. Then if we take a look at Nifty, Nifty again, still in the same exact position where it can, of course, just look to continue higher, look for discount array to continue higher off of. Then if we take a look at the list, GBP Canadian dollar. So right here on the weekly, of course, creating a weekly fair value gap as well, potentially. On the daily, we can see we came into the daily fair value gap currently, and currently we are not expanding higher off of that, but we did come into the daily fair value gap quite late during the day. So in this moment, what I do like to do is when we come into the daily fair value gap quite late, and that order block as well, that previous day low right there is something that can act as a boundary to then go into the 15-minute time frame to look for that entry pattern again. So that is definitely something that could be quite interesting overall. So if anything, if I wanted to trade anything, the GBP Canadian dollar would probably be at the top of my interest currently, even though it's not the highest probability. And what I mean by that is I also, of course, I prefer a pair that hasn't come into the daily fair value gap just yet and then expands higher on that particular day, if that makes sense. Which, if we look at Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, something like this could, of course, be very nice to now continue higher off of that. Now, overall, we got a potential entry on the 1-hour ST. We had a 15-minute ST plus RE as well from the top of my head. Now, we did not really follow through on that. So overall, again, I just want to wait for more fair value gaps higher potentially. and I don't really want to look to get involved anymore here. So I'll also add it to the breakdown list right there, where crude oil, we talked about GBP, JPY, currently following through off that 4-hour value gap right there. Now, if we can create a potentially a daily value gap, etc., that's something to take into account, because right now all we're doing is we're seeing this context high right there. Then we have this context low that is sitting right there. So this low is protected until we deliver towards that high. That is the thought process right now. So now we just want to take into account which time frames are in context. So which time frames have the fair value gaps right there to then look to get involved. So for example, the 1 hour right there could be an entry off of itself. And that could already be an entry. Then take into account the 4-hour value gaps. Where are they getting formed? Where's the daily value gaps getting formed? And then we can just follow order flow higher towards that high. So overall, this is also looking quite nice. Australian dollar, US dollar is not really something I would want to get involved in. I'm also going to add it to the breakdown list. That's the same for silver, gold, and GU right here. Well, GU, actually, I'm going to keep it on the list for now, but the rest is going onto the breakdown list. And the reason for GU still being on the list is because it's still it still has that potential to continue higher off of this. If we get some extra value gaps higher, some extra confirmation as well, that it actually wants to continue higher, could still be quite nice. All right. Then we have nothing on the waiting list because that was GBP JPY, which already moved to the long list. So overall, I am not really interested in the current market. It's pretty low probability for me. I can't really get to a clear, the drawn liquidity for me is pretty clear, but the discount rate is where we want to continue higher off of. So all those steps in price itself is just not super clear to me right now. So overall, I am currently staying out of the market. Tomorrow will likely not get involved unless I see something really clean on GBP Canadian dollar or GBP JPY or whatever it is right there. But overall, for me, I'm more wrong right now than I'm right. So I want to take a small step back to potentially eventually next week or something get involved again. All right, perfect. Thank you.